right, what is going on, guys? We got week 10 lined up, already kicked off with the Thursday night game between the Chargers and the Raiders, which, my goodness, was that a sloppy, nasty game. But you know what? It was actually fairly entertaining in the end. For some people, for others that own Phillip Rivers, like yours truly, maybe not so much. But it is what it is, and here we are rolling into week 10 with a few more things defined as far as the standings. We had a lot of trades going on this past week or so. Lots of player movement, lots of transactions to fortify some teams, some other teams fortifying themselves for next year and beyond. It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. I will say that it's been quite impressive to see how Wes Staines and Mr. Dorsey has been able to, basically transform his team from one that didn't have a whole lot of upside, didn't have a whole lot of things to look forward to for the future, and even for this year. And really, they got younger, they got better, and they got into a much, much better contract situation, and really parlayed their the little bit of success that they had with the players that they had into some really good players, and even acquired some draft picks and improved their position going forward. I really like the way that he did that. When all the dust settles, ultimately that's what you want. You want your team to be in a better position moving forward than where it was when you first started the whole dust storm in the first place. Of course, he made several trades with myself, and I myself have done the exact same thing in improving my team. I think I paid more of a premium than he did, ultimately. But them's the breaks. That's what you try to do for this year versus playing for in the future like he did. Other teams that made some moves, we had SSC and we had the Narwhals making a few trades. A big one, if you want to can call it that. It's kind of a blockbuster where SSC sent good old Alvin Kamara over to the Narwhals. But, in the end, SSC got a pretty good package for him. They did acquire Marlon Mack. They acquired Juju. And there's one other guy. Who did they acquire was the other guy? Anyway, I'm trying to remember who it was as the other one. I'm looking at his team right now, and I don't see it. Anyway, I'm looking at it. I don't see it anywhere. There was a good players that he acquired. On top of that, a nice pick as well. So another team that is transitioning and positioning themselves moving forward, putting themselves in a pretty good contract situation in Spencer Strassmore's clients, playing for the future, but then also acquiring a lot of first round picks. I think he's following somebody's blueprint that was set forth from last year. Can't imagine who that was. But he is trying to position himself along with Wes Staines. And interestingly enough, they play each other this week. We'll get into that matchup as well. But so some trades and moves being made there. Another big move was between Wes Staines again and I've Got the Nuts and Sunil. Sunil really making a big push trying to get that splash name between Lamar Jackson. He did dump some contract years, but he dumped them to the right guy in Wes Staines, who actually can absorb those contract years and even be able to hold on to Hopkins going forward. He did pay a premium in DeAndre Hopkins, who has been a very high floor guy. Hasn't been quite himself this year, but there's still season to play out, so we'll see if that actually continues to bear true as far as just keeping a high floor, low ceiling kind of a guy. And maybe Sunil sees something that we don't and is able to actually parlay that into a young, good quarterback in Lamar Jackson with very low years. He did move on and also acquired Melvin Gordon so that he had every piece of that Chargers backfield. Again, we'll talk about that Chargers-Raiders game in which Gordon seems to be coming on a little bit. He held out for the first, I believe it was 6 weeks of the season, 5 weeks of the season, and it's taken him a little while to kind of get ramped up and going. But that's after the Chargers fired their offensive coordinator, they seem to have a refocused dedication to the running game and running the system through Gordon and Eckler. But I digress. He did. Sunil did acquire some nice wide receivers. Nothing groundbreaking, but again, something with some upside in moving forward. He has something to work with. He does have some depth, and you know what? I mean, the season never ends in the Dynasty League. You're constantly capable of making trades and having conversations all throughout the year. So, there's still moves to be made. We still have, I believe, it's another week or two before the trade deadline. So who knows? Maybe these big trades kind of preempted it, but maybe there is still something to be out there. We still have with this move between Narwhals and Sunil. With I've got the nuts, it'll be interesting to see if Chu gets on his horse and makes a move or two to try and secure his spot going into the playoffs, seeing as his competition did improve their rosters, albeit some of them marginally, but others a little bit better than others. Of course, I've made several trades myself, trying to put myself in a position. I've had a really bad string of luck lately with having the third most, points scored in the league, and just not being able to translate that into wins. Had a really rough streak here in the last 4 to 5 weeks. But if anything is an indicator of potential success, is that my team has a very high floor, and coming up against some of the less competition over the next 4 weeks or so, I should be able to do it. I do have the second toughest schedule in the league, so to at least be hopefully by the end of this week at 500 would be speak well for my potential success going forward. And speaking of that success, we'll go ahead and jump right into my game against the Mud Monkeys to talk about how that matchup will play out, and hopefully will bring me to 500. Of course, I'm going to pick myself. I've done that all year long for every week that I've at least done a podcast. Those other 2 weeks, they don't really count. So we're going to go ahead and call myself in this one. Although I would not be surprised if Mud Monkeys pulls one out of their hat. They have quietly made a few moves here and there throughout the season, and slowly but surely have improved their team. It's an interesting hodgepodge of wide receivers and running backs that they have together over there. They do have a solid running back combination of Damian Williams, Tevin Coleman, and Devonta Freeman. Latavius Murray, that game is curious to me, only because, not because I'm a Falcons fan, but it's because what is the floor for the Saints players? Do they come out, and if the Saints come out and explode for 21 points in the first quarter and a half, do they just kind of cruise from that point forward? If so, then Lat Murray, whom the Mud Monkeys is playing, would potentially have a higher floor because he would get the bulk of the carries, as Kamara's coming off of his injury, and they may just want to continue to rest him going forward. But if the Falcons somehow keep it within 10 points going into the half, then you may see more of the number ones playing, and in doing so, Lat Murray may not see a whole lot of playing time versus Devonta Freeman, who you would think that if the Falcons are keeping it within 10 points and performing well, would have enough production to make up for the difference. So it's kind of an either-or situation with the Mud Monkeys playing Freeman and Murray. One of them's going to perform. The other one may have a decent floor. In the end, I really couldn't say which one's going to do more. Personally, I would have to say probably the Saints come out and blow the doors off of the Falcons, and then Freeman is just relegated to a pass catching role, which doing so is highly unreliable considering the other pass catchers that the Falcons have on their offense. As far as his wide receivers, going with Gallup, Boyd, and Tate, all kind of second tier, solid plays. The one thing with Boyd, who I would say is probably the best of the three. Problem with Boyd, though, is that they're going with the week one, or the first week of a new quarterback, coming off of a bye, which is good. So at least they get a little bit of work together. Problem is that it's just a complete unknown. What do you expect coming out of Boyd, going up against Baltimore, whose secondary? Again, talk about a team that's made moves and improved themselves over the course of the year. Their secondary is actually one of their strengths, and I do not envy that matchup, as Baltimore really will shellac Cincinnati pretty bad. Over on my side, I already had 3 guys go between Rivers, Henry, and Delaney. I always want to say it, Delaney Walker, Darren Waller. So look, I mean, 7 points on average between the 3 of them, and of course that last interception, you just knew it was going to happen with Rivers. He's a gunslinger, and when he just gets to that point where he just doesn't give a flying rat's ass, he just starts flinging that ball all over the place. So you just knew that that 3rd interception was coming. I do like some of my upside with Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, and Montgomery. Did make the trade for Emmanuel Sanders, and I just feel like that dog's going to eat. He going to eat in that Seattle game. Just looks good. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and pick myself, although I'm a 60 to 40% favorite on that one. Just can't really say that I can't go against myself. Sorry, just not going to happen. Next game that we have up here, we have Smashing Neurons with Greenlight for Breezes. Smashing Neuron is, again, a 60-40 favorite over Greenlight. Greenlight got 2 guys to go in the Thursday night game between Hunter Renfrow and Foster Moreau. I like Foster Moreau. I had Foster Moreau earlier, but I had to cut him due to roster constraints. He just is a good stash for later potential tight end. Again, tight ends outside of guys like Gronk and Kelsey, you mostly stash him for a year or 2. Hunter Renfrow came up with 4 points, Moreau with 0. But Renfrow, it's basically what you expect. He is getting a little bit more of a role, but he is going to be the old school possession receiver that you don't really hear anybody talk about anymore. Over on Smashing Neuron's side, she did have David Carr to go. She played him over Goff, which is rather interesting. But I kind of don't blame her. The only reason why is because it's going against Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, Goff doesn't play well on the road. And Pittsburgh's defense has been quietly pretty good the past 5-6 weeks. They've played very, very well. And you could say that, honestly, they've kept the Steelers in the little bit of a playoff hunt that they have just by elevating their play, considering all of the injuries and lack of consistency on the offensive side for the Steelers. For Kelly, she does have Barkley going, Godwin, 2 great matchups for those guys. Tyreek Hill is always a good matchup. Tyreek Hill does have Mahomes coming back, so that's just nothing but upside there. So you got to be happy with that. Lockett, again, matching up. She has all of the pieces that you want in the good matchups coming up between Barkley and Godwin and Hill and Lockett. Those games are just going to be the ones that you really want to have a piece of. The Tampa Bay Arizona game especially, I really feel like it's going to be a shootout, as well as the San Francisco Seattle game, although Seattle's playing in San Francisco and San Francisco's defense is supposed to be pretty good. I think what you saw with Arizona did this last Thursday against them kind of gave a blueprint on how to do it against them. And could be looking at a little bit of a regression for the Niners. They've been running hot for the past 4 or 5 weeks, so you might be looking at an indicator of a little bit of regression there. On the Greenlight's side, he is going with the old man Breeze in that matchup. Again, another game that you want to have a piece of if you have the New Orleans side or a couple of pieces of the Atlanta offense. He is running with Deebo Samuel and Witten, I don't really care for, and the Colts defense against Miami. The play was to play against Miami earlier in the season with defenses, and as is in the NFL versus college, you could run that for about 4 or 5 weeks. You pick on a particular team, and then ultimately that team finally makes some adjustments and it cools off. And adjustments and improvements are made. So it's not quite the matchup as it was, say, week 2 or week 3. The Colts coming in are a little bit banged up, and I just saw that Jacoby Brissett is not going to play. So I'm curious to how much of a lead that they'll be playing with so that they can just pin their ears back and go after Miami in that type of situation. His beloved Patriots are on bye, which got blown out, which we all knew, regression to the mean, as stated before. Going to go with Kelly in this one to win it handily. The next game up that we have on the docket is Ninja Assassins and Emperor John. Now, this one is an interesting one, and the reason why I say that is because the flash for Emperor John and John's team over there is that he could win this one. Chu is coming into this with 2 guys currently in his roster as buys. think that's kind of a cop-out, really. If he just goes ahead and decides that he wants to take the loss on this one, he could actually lose the division lead if Sunil wins, because Sunil has the tie and would have one less loss. So that may not be in his best interest. That being said, going back to looking at this particular matchup, he does have Russell Wilson, again, going into that good matchup there. Question about whether or not Le'Veon Bell will be healthy enough to go for the Jets against the Giants. And if so, then that could be a good matchup for him as well. Don't like the Anderson play. The Ronald Jones play, again, you want good pieces of that Tampa Bay Arizona game. Ultimately, I think John could take a piece out of the playbook that Dorsey just made, with moving a couple of particular pieces and improving his team's floor overall and moving forward going into the future. Thielen being hurt is not helpful for him. Ultimately you can only play the guys that you have. Slayton on his bench, I think, would actually be a good high side guy to play. Definitely over Hollister. I don't think. Hollister got a couple of those plays, but I just don't think that he's not Disley, and I don't think that you can rely on that. You got to take your shots, but you know what? Ultimately, that's his roster there. Over on Ninja's side, having Mahomes back is always a plus. Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, the two hottest running backs in the league. When you have those three guys, you're going to put up a solid floor no matter what. The problem is the rest of his team. He does have guys on bye, and he has guys that are hurt. There's a need for adjusting this roster, especially going into the playoffs potentially. But we do have a little bit more time before the trade deadline. That's the word that I was looking for and struggling to put together. So with the trade deadline coming, I just don't know that there's much to be had out there, especially after the flurry of moves that have happened in the last week or so. Some of the bigger names and more important names have moved. So if there's anything out there, we'll have to see. But like I was saying last week, it's a keeper league with a dynasty idea, so you adjust all of your moves accordingly, which is part of the reason why guys aren't out there to just pick up. So you have to make moves. You have to engage with other team owners, and we're seeing the byproduct of not doing that right now with Chu's roster kind of dwindling away. That being said, my projection is actually going to be an upset here. I think John pulls this one out in a squeaker with the status quo as of this recording if Chu does not make any adjustments or make any moves. I think you got three guys. Yes, you can win with three guys, but they all have to put up basically 30 points. And I just don't see that with Dalvin Cook or with Christian McCaffrey or Mahomes. They're going to be ginger with Mahomes. Cook has got a horrible matchup in Dallas, and McCaffrey's got a horrible matchup in Green Bay, with Green Bay being pissed off from their last game. Again, Emperor John in a surprise shocker going into Week 10. All right, next matchup. SSC with Wes Staines. Again, the old boys going at it again with each other, old friends. Again, I like what Wes Staines has done, and I like some of what Spencer has done. Spencer Strassmore's client, Avery's done over there on his team. I like some of that as well. It's both of these teams coming off of a busy week in the transactions, and it's just a common theme for this week, isn't it? It's woven into every matchup, all of the trades that have been made. Neither one is really, it's a 50-50 toss, pick 'em, whatever, coin toss, pick 'em. Both of them projected for 54 and 56 points. Could go either way. It's really tough to say what's going to happen. Looking at Wes Staines' team over here, he does have Stafford going, who's been hot lately, but he is going against Chicago in Chicago, which he traditionally does not do very well with. His new acquisitions of Gurley and Drake should have nice floors for them. Drake being the new guy over there in the Arizona against Tampa Bay matchup. My curious question for the week with Drake is whether or not David Johnson is healthy enough to go, although David Johnson has said that he's 100%. and he's ready to go. We've kind of heard that the past couple of weeks, not necessarily 100%, but that he's ready to go, and he hasn't really played. We saw Drake come into this matchup last week against the Niners with having 3 days on the playbook and put up a massive day. So with another full week of prep with that offense, I'm curious to see what's really going to go play. Going to play out for him. That I think that could be quietly a really good pickup for Dorsey going forward. But I had to make that trade. You got to pay to get pay to get. You got to spend money to make money. That's what it's called. I'm stumbling all over my words now. As far as his wide receivers concerned, he is going with Hollywood Brown and Larry Fitz. Again, having the Arizona-Tampa Bay game mixed in there. Marquise Brown, I think, could be a very high-side play in that Cincinnati-Baltimore game. Maybe catches one, maybe two bombs, but possibly just one. Ebron had the meeting with his coaches saying, hey, basically it's going to be a squeaky wheel gets the grease situation, so don't be surprised if Ebron gets fed a little bit, especially with the backup quarterback coming in, Hoyer, who is actually not horrible. He's not starter caliber in the NFL, but he's going to get you through a rough patch. He is a professional and capable of doing that. We've seen that with a couple of guys like McCown and Fitzmagic and now Hoyer. Gerald Everett playing again in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't cover the tight end very well, especially well. They're kind of middle of the pack when it comes to that kind of thing. So could be interesting to see if Everett really explodes. I've watched a few of the Rams games this year, and it really just seems like they've made a concerted effort to force feed Everett in particular situations. So don't be surprised if we see Everett have a solid game. Over on Avery's team over there, he is rolling with Trubisky, who, again, squeaky wheel gets the grease, has been complaining and kind of has a chip on his shoulder coming into this matchup at home. It's a good matchup to have. Detroit's defense is getting exposed a little bit, mostly because of the fact that Detroit can't run the ball to control the clock and control the pace and put themselves in a hitter's count as far as the defense is concerned. The newly acquired Marlon Mack, Calvin Ridley, and Juju, again, all high floors. Juju did pop up at the end of the week with a little bit of I think it was a hamstring. And it's going to be a situation where it's going to be a wait and see to game time. Problem is that he's a 4 o'clock start. If it was 1 o'clock start, it might be much easier for him because then you could always swap him out, no problem. He is rolling with the triple tight ends of Trey Burton, Jack Doyle, and Cameron Brate. Again, Jack Doyle in the Indy-Miami game could play out very well for him. Rolling with Cameron Brate instead of O.J. Howard. I mean, personally, I would just throw caution to the wind and say, hey, let's go for it. I think O.J. Howard, this is the breakout game for O.J. Howard in the Tampa Bay Arizona game. Really, really do. Again, going with the Bucs in that Tampa Bay Arizona game. I mean, I get it. I just don't know that it's the best pick. I'm going to say Wes Staines in this one just because I think his floor is a little bit higher than Avery's, although I wouldn't be surprised for it to go the other direction. It's a pick 'em. What do you want? So we're going to do exactly that. We're just going to pick 'em. Next game we have, I've got the Nuts and Bad Hombres. I've got the Nuts have jumped out to a huge lead of 25-8, with 3 guys having gone in the Thursday night game versus the 1 for Bad Hombres. Although I say it was a nice floor for 8 points for Keenan Allen for not having a touchdown mixed in there. It's a pretty good production overall. He kind of bounced back nicely there, especially after I think it's like 6 weeks of Keenan Allen basically doing nothing. So you get a nice bounce back there. Over on the other side, Sunil did run with the double running back combination for the Chargers, which was a bit of a ballsy play, to say the least, of Eckler and Gordon. He got 23 points out of them, with Tyrell Williams only putting up a 2-spot for him, which is a little disappointing considering the matchup should have been a little bit juicier for that. But again, Oakland, what do they like to do? They like to throw to the tight end, and they like to run the ball, and so that's what they're going to do. Tyrell Williams has been steady, but you just, again, the magic word of regression had to be coming, because there's no way that you can keep scoring a touchdown every single week. It's just not going to happen, especially with a mediocre to slightly better than average offense that is Oakland. Look, Oakland's done well with their coaching staff. It's just they haven't, they just don't have as many of the tools in place to really become as explosive as they potentially could be. For Sunil, the newly acquired Lamar Jackson should have a nice day, although I say his floor is a little bit lower than usual, mostly because of the fact that they're going to get out ahead of Cincinnati, and Lamar Jackson just doesn't throw the ball very much. And so I just can't see them wanting to run him a whole lot, especially with him being a little bit under the weather. If they get out to a good 3 touchdown lead, don't even be surprised that if Lamar Jackson just doesn't even play the fourth quarter. I just wouldn't be surprised in that. Devin Singletary in a nice juicy matchup. He's being worked more and more and more into that offense and taking more time away from Gore. Gore is that steady plotter in the backfield, which it's quite impressive, really, that he's still averaging. I think it's over 4 yards, almost 5 yards a carry for Gore. But Singletary is just more and more being worked into the system and being brought up to speed and becoming more and more the lead back. Running with Devontae Adams, Sammy Watkins, and the newly acquired Sammy Watkins and Zach Pascal. I would have liked the Pascal move a little bit more if Brissett had played, but with Hoyer playing, I don't know that I like it as much. I think that I would actually prefer the Jamison Crowder play, only because Crowder's going to get just an assload of targets, and he's, if anything, again, the possession receiver. We haven't heard that term in the lexicon of fantasy in a while. I have a feeling it's about to start coming back. Those types of wide receivers that just catch you, it's the Edelman, the Welker, I'm going to catch you 10 balls for 80 yards, type guy. You're going to see more and more of that. Over on Ombre's side, Rashad Penny, Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber had a higher floor until the front office came out and coaching staff came out and said that Jones is going to be our number one running back, and so you just know that no matter what happens in the game, that he's going to get the bulk of the carries, and Barber is not. And no matter what Jones does or Barber does in this game, next week Barber will more than likely be the starter again, just because I just don't think Ronald Jones is going to be able to put up enough points for them to. They're going to feel like they pigeonholed themselves because they made that statement. And if Jones doesn't come out and just completely light it up, they're going to put Barber back in. This is not the week for Barber. Maybe next week. Penny is not it's just not good. Of course, he has Carson Wentz on a bye. Look, there's quarterbacks out there to pick up and play. Overall, I just think that Sunil wins this one walking away. He is an 80-20 favorite. Not much else to say about that one. And our good old game of the week. We have Miller High Life against the Nahant Narwhals. Miller High Life coming into this one with a 5-4 record against the Narwhals, who are 6-3. Narwhals are a 75% favorite in this one. And they made some moves. They definitely made some moves to shore up their running back core and support their wide receivers. What's funny about this one is that Mike has never really had a whole lot of running backs for the Narwhals. He's never really had a whole lot of running backs. He's usually rolled with the 4 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back type combination. But yeah, it's interesting to see that he's made this transition to rolling with 3 running backs and 3 solid ones at that. Again, the Baltimore-Cincinnati matchup. Baltimore's going to get out ahead. What are they going to do? They're going to hand the ball off, and Ingram's going to get the bulk of the carries. That being said, if they get out too far ahead, I could see Ingram getting less and less carries as the game goes on, because they're going to want to save him for the next week. Chubb in a beautiful matchup against Buffalo. Buffalo actually doesn't stop the run very well. Kamara coming back after having a couple weeks off. He says he's ready to go. We'll see. Again, it could be a situation where if New Orleans jumps out to too far of a lead, that Kamara gets less and less of a touch and less of a run, especially considering that Lat Murray is so effective going forward. So, although his floor is so high, his ceiling is lower, only because of the fact that the matchups are just too good. You want a good matchup, but if it's too juicy and too lopsided, and looks like it could just get to be a runaway. You know how the NFL is; they don't care. They'll just pull the guys back because they don't want to use them. It's that workload management idea. So that one could be a little bit of a problem. Michael Thomas playing for him as well at wide receiver. this is the only caveat to that, in that Michael Thomas is the only real wide receiver that they have. All he does is catch everything that's thrown. I think he's got like a 90+% catch rate right now. If it wasn't that, it was high 80s. I can't remember the exact number, but it was some insane stat that I heard, that this year he's basically caught, it's like 88 or 90% of the balls thrown to him. And he's, again, it's a guy where his floor is very high, and I think his ceiling is very high, because if the Saints explode, it's going to be one of two guys, Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara, and I feel like it's going to be Thomas in this one and not so much Kamara. Just again, the idea that Kamara is hurt, and coming into this with a lingering, let's just put it that way, even though he says he's 100% and ready to go, you know that no guy is really 100%. He does have another good piece in Mike Evans in this Tampa Bay Arizona game. He has all of the pieces that you want in all of these juicy matchups, so it's going to be a tough for Miller High Life to bounce through this one. He does have Aaron Rodgers going, again, coming off of that bad game last week. Miller High Life does have Aaron Rodgers coming off that bad game this last week, so you know how Aaron Rodgers is. He gets a chip on his shoulder, he throws a little fit like a little princess, and throws and stomps his feet, and then comes out and throws for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers did that, even though he doesn't have a ton of wide receivers. It doesn't seem like it makes that much of a difference. He does have Ezekiel Elliott going against Minnesota in Dallas, which helps him a little bit, raises his floor. His ceiling, though, is kind of limited just because of the fact it is Minnesota, and they stop the run very well, so they're going to be looking for him. And honestly, I feel like Minnesota's going to say, okay, we're going to stop Zeke, and then we're going to make Amari Cooper beat us, who just came off of another MRI. Chris Carson matched up against San Francisco in San Francisco. It's just a war of attrition for Carson. They're going to give the ball to him 20, 25 times, and eventually he's going to break one. But through that attrition, he's going to average very nicely and has a nice floor again. Demaryius Thomas, not a good play, but you know what? You got to play the guys that you've got. I think the bye-apocalypse has hit Miller High Life. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys on bye this week, including his defense of the Broncos. Don't know why you carry a defense like the Broncos through a bye week, but hey, roster management. What are you going to do? Devontae Parker has become the number 1 over there in Miami. Could be a nice matchup. And Amari Cooper, the aforementioned slightly injured Amari Cooper. He's done this before this year, so I don't know that necessarily it's a situation where he's going to prove me wrong. Like, oh, you said he was not any good because he was hurt and he comes out and does well. But, you know, he's done this before and he's laid an egg. And he's done this before and he's come out and put up massive points. Who knows? It's been the scourge of this year where we haven't been able to get a whole lot of accurate reporting as to how hurt these guys really are and whether or not they're actually going to play. I mean, see David Johnson 3 weeks ago, right? And for 2 weeks in a row. It's just the way it works. Ultimately, I think the Narwhals just go ahead and walk away with those. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a massive performance from Mike's team. But it's just, I think his depth is just better in a week where his matchups are better as well. So overall, that just spells disaster for Miller High Life. So Mike will win that one. Again, going back and looking at it, I'm picking myself to win in the Smashing Neurons and Greenlight Fabrices. I'm picking Kelly's team to win. Ninja Assassins and Emperor John, I'm calling the upset of the week. I'm calling for John to pull another upset off, mostly because Ninja Assassins is going to ignore his roster in this one and let it just ride. I mean, look, he may end up winning just because he's got the highest running back in the league. I just don't know that his ceiling is as high because it's on the road and in Green Bay, and Green Bay is pissed off. That being said, by the way, Ninja Assassins falls. They'll be 7-3. Narwhals would be 7-3. And if the Nuts, who I have to win, they'll actually the division, and Narwhals and Chew will be Mike and Chew will actually be tied. So there could be some serious playoff implications when it comes to that kind of stuff, because going from division lead to trying to vie for a playoff spot, going into divisional games, that could be something serious. Next game, I had West Staines winning over Avery. At least I think that's what I said. It was a coin flip, toss 'em. If I said it the other way, who cares? Fifth game, we got Ivan Nuts walking away from Bad Hombres here, mostly because Hombres doesn't have a quarterback. I haven't picked one up, and again, Nuts' team is just too deep with some good matchups, and also they have a 25-8 point lead to start. And the game of the week between Miller High Life and the Narwhals, I have Narwhals walking away from this one, just with, again, just too many good matchups and too much depth. Even if only half of them hit, it's just going to be too much for Miller High Life in the end. So there you go, guys. That is our matchups for the week 10. That's our preview. It went a little bit longer because I wanted to talk a little bit about the trades. But good luck to all you guys, especially to everyone but Mud Monkeys. Y'all have a good week. I'll see you next time.